Right, good evening everyone. Thank you for having me. As I said, I'm Amanda Evans. I'm the Team Wildlife Director here at Warwickshire Wildlife Trust. I have been here for 15 years. However, there's a bit of disclaimer in this. I am from a people background, so all of my roles have been around involving people in getting outdoors and the natural environment. So please don't ask me lots of questions about specific species because I do know a little bit, but I don't know specifics. So I'm going to talk to you tonight a little bit about our 2030 strategy and how small actions can make a big difference. And that's all about what Team Wilder is really. So Warwickshire Wildlife Trust was established in 1970. So we celebrated our 50th anniversary on Zoom in COVID. So we have been going for quite a long time. Started off with a small group of individuals who were basically campaigning for their local green spaces. You know, a handful of people who were worried about building on local nature reserves and stood up for nature, really, and then grew and grew, and now we've got 28,900 members across Coventry, Warwickshire and Solihull. So we cover the old Warwickshire boundaries, even though Coventry and Solihull are now in West Midlands. So it can be a bit confusing. We have over 800 volunteers and they are doing a mixture of muddy and non-muddy roles. So we have people going out and doing practical conservation work on nature reserves, surveying reserves, they're the people to ask about species. And then we have a whole range of volunteers who are helping us in our visitor centres, they're helping us with admin in the offices, helping our education team deliver sessions for schools and local children and young people. And we have 64 nature reserves across the county. So the nearest one to here, I think, is Welcome Hills. And we have, basically, you are currently closer to one of our nature reserves than you are to a McDonald's anywhere across the county. Yeah, and no more than 5 miles as the crow flies to a nature reserve. So we're spread quite widely. There are a few around Stratford and Raven as well. We've got River Arrow. By Ulster and sort of others around Harbury and Bordering into Warwick district. So we engage a lot of children and young people, and this is one of our key kind of threads of our work. So I think that's in 2023 we engaged over 15,500. I have to say a lot of those were children kind of at primary school age, and a big part of our next kind of strategy is around engaging that secondary school age when the young people are really starting to form all their ideas and opinions, and hopefully we can build that kind of activism and interest for nature into what they're doing and help them to stand up for nature. So in the midst of COVID and trying to navigate all of the regulations, we actually developed our 10-year strategy. So scarily, we're now 4 years into that strategy. And it was really Warwickshire Wildlife Trust is part of a big wildlife trust movement. So there are wildlife trusts across the whole country. And all of the time I'd worked here until this point, we were all working to slightly different things. We all had kind of an overall picture of what we wanted to do. But for the first time, all of the wildlife trusts came together with a really common message and shared ambition. And that really is about our vision, purpose and approach. And we can divide that into 2 areas. So our vision is of a thriving natural world where wildlife plays value in addressing the climate, ecological and human health emergencies. So nature has a huge role to play in everything that we do, and our water quality, our air quality, all of those things. And you know, nature is in decline, so we need to build all of these things into what we're trying to do. And our purpose is to bring wildlife back and help people back to nature. And we're really ambitious in the way that we're trying to do this. So we're trying to speak with a very bold and confident voice and really telling the truth about the state of nature and what we need to do to put nature into recovery. So you may or may not have seen some of the work we've been doing around general election and trying to help people to search out the information on what's going on in their constituencies to help inform people's decision making. And it's really about us helping people to do and to shout about the value of nature. So we're looking at more space for nature with more people on nature's side. So the more space for nature, we're aiming for 30% of land in recovery, protected and connected for nature by 2030. So we have our nature reserves and they're brilliant. They're thriving for wildlife, but really we need to be making sure that everything in between those nature reserves gives wildlife a corridor to move around and to go from one nature reserve to the next one or to one garden to the next one. We'll talk about that in a bit. And then Team Wilder is all about 1 in 4 people taking action for nature in Warwickshire, Coventry and Solihull. And I'll explain the foundations of that in a little while. It isn't just a number pulled out of thin air, it is based on social science. I'm just going to try and attempt to show you this little film. It works.
We all need nature, yet we've exploited our natural world and the climate to breaking point. Wild places are disappearing, half of UK wildlife is under threat. Temperatures are rising and extreme weather events are on the increase. And as the nature and climate emergencies worsen, the threat to life on Earth escalates. But it doesn't have to be this way. We have the chance for a better and wilder future. We can create a world where people and wildlife thrive alongside each other. We must stop the burning of fossil fuels and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And we must also let nature help tackle climate change and adapt to its impact by restoring and connecting up woods, salt marsh and peatland. Nature can store carbon, provide clean air and water, protect us from flooding and extreme weather, and provide the food we need to survive. The wildlife trusts have been working hard for decades to help nature recover, bringing back wildlife once lost from our sea and land. But we need you. We need to be bold. We need to take decisive action. And we need to work together. Every action, big or small, makes a difference in the battle against nature loss and climate change. It's not too late to solve this. Let's act now for a wilder future. We all.
So that gives a bit of an overview of kind of where we're going really, and how climate change and the decline and the ecological crisis are interconnected. So just a bit of background really, so on the ecological emergency. So this is from the State of Nature report from 2023. Basically, everything is in decline. 19% of all species have declined since 1970, and 13% of all insects have declined in distribution since 1970. So the proportion of sites of where they've been found has declined. And 54% of plant species have declined since 1970. Quite often when I go and talk to communities, they remember wildflower meadows and all of the different. My father-in-law used to talk to me all the time about wildflower meadows and all of these amazing plants and flowers and the colours and all of those things. And some of the children and young people that are growing up today have never seen what that looks like. So it's really important that we start to do things to bring some of these species back and to just spread everything across and increase that distribution. And on top of that, we've got 16% of species that are now at risk of extinction. So this is basically just a bit of an illustration of all of that, showing how things have declined from 1970 down to 2016. We've lost more than half of our wildlife since we were set up in 1970. And that shows the abundance of 214 species that are kind of identified as priority species to indicate good habitat. So we're trying to now reverse that and start to make that graph go upwards. And this is kind of a really complex picture of nature's decline and all of the different things that kind of contribute to that. Climate change, urbanisation, pollution, agricultural management, freshwater management, invasive species, fisheries, woodland management, lots of negative impacts on nature that are basically meaning that kind of those corridors and that space for nature is declining. We ran a series of green conversations earlier in this year. I feel like some of you may have been there. Some people's faces look familiar. And these kind of reflect some of the concerns that people were telling us about as well. People are concerned about the quality of their rivers. They're concerned about air quality and the amount of planning and development in areas. And all of those things kind of build together to sort of basically bring that negativity into play. So when I said before that 1 in 4 people isn't based on us just picking a number out of thin air, we went back to science, social science, and for the first time in all of my time at the Trust, we've been really using science for our people work. So we've always used science to show us and help us kind of with our conservation work. But our people work has been very much about our experience, our knowledge, our skills, the things that we've learned as we've done it. But there's social science behind all of this that then leads us to shape how we work. So this is some YouGov data from 2010 to 2019 around people's concerns for the environment. So back in 2019, concerns for the environment were at the highest level on records. This was when we had Extinction Rebellion. Back in 2013 was the winter storms and flooding. Now, if we think about what's happened between 2019 and 2024, I'm fairly certain that that will continue to have been going up and up. For the first time in all of my time at the Wildlife Trust, we had to close Brandon Marsh about 4 or 5 times this winter because you couldn't get to it because of flooding. So it has got worse. More communities are experiencing flooding. I know in kind of South Warwickshire as a whole, there's certain areas that, you know, regularly experience flooding. But there's a real gap between what people say. So all of those people are saying that they're concerned about the environment. Down at this end of the graph, the far end, 94% of people say that they value the access that they have to green spaces. Yet down at this end, only 4% volunteer to help the environment, or even just further down there, do donate any time or even do individual actions to support the environment. So there's a huge kind of value action gap here. People value it but aren't taking the action. So what we're aiming to do between now and 2030 and beyond is make that gap smaller and smaller. So while people are saying they're valuing nature, this percentage of people actually doing things is increasing and closing that value action gap. So the 25%, the 1 in 4, the magical number, comes from this evidence around tipping point for social change. So social norms are the kind of the informal rules that we all abide by. So the things that people do and they copy what other people do. And to make something a social norm, we actually only need 25% of people doing something. So I would have expected that to actually be quite a lot higher. So that actually, you know, you'd be thinking you need 70% of people to be doing something to make a difference. 25%, so 1 in 4 people. So that's where that number comes from. So what we want to do is to be helping 1 in 4 people to take action for nature, so that that becomes the normal thing for everybody to do, and that we start to close that value action gap. So Team Wilder is all about empowering and enabling people to take those actions and to help nature's recovery, both at land and on sea, at sea. But it's really about us creating a movement. So a movement of people, a group of people who share those same concerns about the environment and are taking action to do something, and helping then working collectively to get voices heard and better decisions made for the environment. So it also means that small individual actions can start to contribute to something bigger. We'll talk about a few examples in a little bit. But to be able to do this, we really need to reach out into communities and to understand communities better, to listen and to understand what support and help is needed. Even though it's only 25%, that's still a lot of people in Coventry, Warwickshire and Solihull, and we are only a staff team of about 50. So we're not going to individually be able to talk to that many people. So what we're trying to do with Team Marder is create a duplicator effect. Now, some people will have seen this in dodgy sales kind of marketing tools and things. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to sell you anything at all. But what I'm trying to do is illustrate how we as staff, I could go and talk to 4 people. That's only a really small percentage of people. However, if those 4 people then go talk to another 4 people, we've reached 16. If those 16 then go and talk to another 16, my maths gets bad. So, but you can see what I'm trying to say. We need our communities to be talking to their friends and families and reaching out and kind of telling them how important nature is and helping them to take action as well. So by a few people taking action and the more people following, we start to build that movement and start to really kind of build that sense of people working collectively with a shared cause. So we've talked a little bit about kind of this already, but basically interlinked climate and nature emergency. So carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is warming the planet. Higher temperatures are forcing animals and plants to move. And then human activities are producing greenhouse gases, which are absorbed by the land and ocean. But the more our natural places are disappearing, then the less places there are to absorb that carbon. So we're really in this kind of real mix of having to manage both and to really get on top of either or. We need to be looking at what we can do to support both. So one example here is around peat. So 80% of the UK's peatlands are damaged, and they can be damaged through grazing or by removing the peat to make compost. But that means once you've damaged them, they're no longer there to absorb the carbon and water. And when they're damaged, they actually add carbon back into the atmosphere rather than taking it away, and therefore reduce the risk of flooding downstream. So I don't think we've got many peatlands in Warwickshire. So what can we do to try and kind of help with this? So we can start to use peat-free compost. And that then starts to become one of those actions where you become part of a Team Marder movement, taking action for nature, by speaking out in the importance of peat and supporting the ban on the sale of peat compost. So this is something that the Wildlife Trust have been campaigning for a while, because actually, if you go to a garden centre and you can't buy peat compost, nobody's going to buy it. So nobody's able to buy it. So the Wildlife Trust has been campaigning for a while to actually get a complete ban on the sale of compost containing peat. But if we can't get to that point, you can make a choice to buy peat-free compost, and that then starts to kind of build that collective sense of achieving something and contributing. So another example. Hedgehogs eat different types of worm and beetles and bugs throughout the year, and in August they rely heavily on the scarab beetle. But climate change poses a significant threat to hedgehogs because their prey are vulnerable to increased extremes of the weather. So increased heat, increased flooding, all of those things potentially risk the source of their food source being in decline. So they then can't eat. This map shows hedgehog tracking over 12 nights. So you can see how far that they can travel in quite a short period of time. And they could use up to 50 hectares of land in a summer season to look for food. And that's the equivalent of 20 or 30 gardens. So how can we help? So we are working, Warwickshire Wildlife Trust are working collectively with other wildlife trusts to try and talk to housing developers to get developers to include hedgehog holes in their fences as standard when they're putting up the fences between all the houses. We're working with schools and communities to encourage them to take action and to create more hedgehog hibernation sites, to plant plants that support those bugs that hedgehogs eat. And we're also working with local councils. On a personal level, can you put a hole in your fence or in your garden and start to connect your garden with another garden and the next one after that to create that kind of corridor of 20 or 30 gardens so that the hedgehogs have got space to move throughout that landscape. We've been working in Brunswick in Leamington, and a lady there was she was a hedgehog rescue lady, and she was taking in hedgehogs, and then she's but what else can I do? All I'm doing is taking in these rescued hedgehogs, but I don't want to be rescuing them in the first place. Can we do anything? So we started to talk to her, and she then started to talk to her neighbours, and they've all now created these little holes in their fences, and there's now a nice corridor for them to move along. But then the street behind them also heard about that, and they've now done it. So we're really starting to build, like, one person's small action in their garden can have a huge impact on hedgehogs. And you can also make the choice not to use pellets in your garden. So tree sparrows. UK tree sparrow population's been in severe decline, thought to be 93% since 1970, so that's huge. For every tree sparrow that we've got today, there were 20 in 1970. And it's thought that those declines in numbers are linked to a lack of food over the winter period. And there's areas where the action's been taken, so we're working with some farmers, then we're starting to see numbers increasing. So it helps to be doing this and to be making change. So we work across across the area with farmers to help them to install tree sparrow villages on farms at a landscape scale. So we work alongside farmers. We can provide advice to them where to situate these things, kind of where to purchase and those kind of things. But then what we do is we have a farmers network then. So the farmers regularly get together, they share what they're doing on their farm, and what better way for a farmer to learn about and to take advice from somebody that's doing it for themselves rather than us saying, well, this is what we think you should do, but it's not our livelihood. It's not us that have got to manage that land. And so actually working with other farmers and getting them to connect with each other is much more powerful. So we've been increasing nesting opportunities as well, and some of the local farmers have been planting wild birdseed crops. So that provides additional birdseed over the winter. So we don't always have big farms to make these changes on, but we can do things in our garden. We can take action to feed the birds, but we can also talk to people about why we do these things. We can talk to people about the importance of providing food for birds and the hunger gap that we've got, and also grow native plants that provide those seeds for chicks and fledglings over the spring and summer. Barn owls. So an increase in agricultural intensity and landscape development has led to quite a loss of habitat, roosting and nesting sites for barn owls. And there's also been a reduction in the small mammals that they are feeding on. So particularly grassy fields on farms and the spread of urbanisation and intensification of farming has really affected nesting sites, but also foraging habitats. So again, we've been working with the farmers across the area. We've been supporting farmers to install barn owl boxes, which are enormous. I actually only saw one the other day when somebody asked me to pay for one. Somebody in the trust asked me to pay for one for a farmer on my credit card. I didn't have to pay for it. And they are absolutely enormous. So we can't expect people to necessarily be able to put them up in their back garden. So we have to work on a bigger scale. And we're working again with those farmers. But as well as putting the nest boxes up, they are changing the way that they're managing some of the land to help small animals that provide that food for owls. And nest box surveys have been kind of carried out where we put these nest boxes, and they're having a great success with breeding pairs now in those in those boxes. So I certainly haven't got enough big enough gardens to put a barn owl box in mine, but I think, you know, the key thing is to talk to people around about leaving areas of long grass, which supporting small mammals, so barn owls have got enough food to eat. And to just encourage people, if you do know of people that own bigger pieces of land, to help them to, you know, purchase, understand why we need to put up more barn owl boxes. Swifts. I'm sure you will have heard about swifts.
Yes.
So swifts spend almost their entire life in the air, and pretty much doing everything while they're flying. So they have an impressive top speed of 69 miles per hour. So, you know, pretty fast. I think actually I heard on the radio this morning, I think cheetah is only 70, so they're not far behind cheetah. But they are our summer visitors. I think for lots of people that signals the start of summer, she says, as it's absolutely pouring down outside. And they spend their winters in Africa. So they kind of migrate 3,500 miles pretty much a year, and fuel off on the way. So they pair for life, return to the same site each year, and don't start breeding till they're 4 years old. So part of the reason for that decline could be the survival of the younger birds. And again, a huge decline, 60% since 1995. So, you know, for every 10 swifts we've got today, there were 25 in 1995. So, I think this is a series of pictures. Is anybody familiar with harbouring? So, this is harbouring. This is an old pub that the developers were going to have converted into flats. So one particular, so this is what they look like now. One lady had observed swifts nesting in that pub, and so she worked with the developers and the local parish council to make sure that swift boxes were included in that build. So you can just about see here swift boxes. But the really impressive thing was that she then talked to the rest of the council, the rest of the village, and there are now, I think she said last time, about 50 nest boxes in the village. So you can see all sorts of houses. And they made them through, I think there was kind of a group that made them, but you can just buy them, but you can purchase them. So there's now, Harbury is now a Swift village. And she's now talking to, the lady is talking to Lighthorn, I think, because they want to do something similar. And I know down in South Warwickshire, Jason, I think the name, there's a lady that runs a Swifts kind of lots of talks and things like that, Swifts in Action, I think it might be called. And to try and kind of encourage more people to put up Swift boxes. So you can see it's not like a barn owl box, it's not enormous, you know, it's something that is reasonable to put up in houses, but we're also working with housing developers like Orbit Housing to really try and incorporate those wildlife friendly ideas into their housing estates. And they have actually become the first UK housing association to commit to ensuring that 30% of their outdoor space is managed for nature. So we are kind of acting as a critical friend. So when they're planning things, we're advising what they could and could do, or what they shouldn't do. And they are really starting to create kind of more important habitats for Swiss and other wildlife. That's the same. So as we've just said, you know, how do we join that movement? Then we can put Swift boxes on our house. We can speak about the importance of providing nesting habitats for swifts and how numbers have declined. You know, working with local communities as well to increase the diversity of plants which support the insects that swifts rely on. So, or even become a Swift friendly village like Harbury. So the lady there is brilliant, and she is happy to provide advice and help for other communities. I think there is actually kind of a regular meeting of a few of the villages now that are wanting to kind of become swift friendly villages. So amphibians as well, breed in ponds, lakes in the spring, but they spend most of their year on land, feeding on worms, slugs and insects, but basically will eat anything that'll fit in their mouths. But climate change poses a significant threat as increased weather events are impacting on freshwater habitats. So those habitats are in decline. Though all of the amphibians, including frogs, toads and newts, have declined as a result of that, and it says an estimated 20 tonnes of toads are killed on our roads each year. So there's an area in Solihull, I don't know if they still do it, and it was basically it was only like a very small kind of service road type things. But they basically had a toad crossing, and there was a young girl on the radio actually a few months ago who's been doing that as well. So you know, it's those kind of things. The more cars are on the road, the more chances that we're going to be killing our toads. But once Warwickshire was covered in ponds that kind of formed in wet fields as a water source for animals across, kind of creating that network of ponds. So we're now working with farmers, landowners and communities to try and restore ponds and create that landscape and that corridor for people for amphibians to go across. But we also create log piles and dead hedges, so that's the additional habitat when they're on land. And we help to raise that kind of awareness and the human actions on them. So again, we're working with farmers and landowners. That's just the pictures of a pond with the amphibians in it. So there is lots and lots of advice on our website, and you know, can we create a small wildlife pond? They don't have to be very big. A washing up bowl size is enough. Or create a log pile in your garden or a community green space. And again, just talking to people about what we're doing. I mean, you could organise a toad patrol where you live if you wanted to. But there's lots and lots of kind of advice like this on our website. So, you know, if you are interested in doing any of these things, have a look. There's loads and loads of how-to guides. So Team Wilder, as you'll hopefully have seen through some of those examples, it's all about kind of having everybody on board. Big landowners, universities, businesses, schools, all trying to work together and create kind of opportunities for us to create new habitats or restore habitats on land and connect that together. So it's really a huge kind of effort. Individual actions, as I say, we can see more on our website. There's a few ideas there. But all of that really does come together to collectively have an impact. If you are part of a community and there's a small green space in your community that you would like to improve, we do have a Wilder Communities Advisor who can either come out and visit, or if you send some photos, they might be able to make some recommendations. This is something we want to do more of, because our Wilder Communities Advisor is only 3 days a week. And actually, to reach all of those kind of communities in Warwickshire, Coventry and Solihull, we're going to need a lot more advice there. But they provide kind of a summary of the discussion, and they then give some site-specific recommendations for what you might be able to do there. And people are already taking action. We have this Team Wilder map on our website, and it enables, it's a bit more full now, I should swap this picture because there's a lot more people that have put things on there. The point of this map is to show that there are lots of people doing things and to provide advice and inspiration. So you can go onto there, you can post it with the name of a community group that you might be part of, so that people could go and find where they are and see what's going on in their local area. Other people just post on there what they're doing. And that then provides kind of inspiration for other people. Think, oh, you know, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could make a wildlife pond in my garden. So please have a look at that. And if you're taking action, please add your pin to the map. And you know, thank you for all of the amazing support of having us here to talk to you. For every £1 that we receive in donations from our members, actually helps us to unlock further £5 in grant funding, which we can use as match funding. So we are Wilder together. We are Team Wilder. There we go. Any questions?
Anybody got any questions?
I have one question that's just come in from Regina Kilburn. This is on Zoom. She says, in my village road, there are a few small birds or small mammals. What do we have to do? Dozens of domestic cats. My neighbour's cat brings home at least one dead bird, mouse, vole, mole, etc. every day. Every day I don't dare let the grass grow long because of only small mammals that the cats don't kill are rats. I can't encourage rats. So what can be done about that? It's a very sad situation.
It is, but it's a difficult one for us to do anything about because people are always going to want to have a domestic cat.
A bell. They
I don't
have a bell.
A bell. Yeah. I mean, there are plants that you can plant that discourage cats coming in the garden as well. So I've put lemongrass, I think it is, under no, not that. Lemon balm underneath my bird feeder, and that does seem to have kept our neighbours' cats away. I can't promise, that's only what I've tried. But you know, it's a really, really tricky one. But you know, it's not always about leaving a whole area of long grass as well. So you may have come across no mow May. And then people don't mow in May, and then they mow their lawn in June, and it's all, you know, all that grass is gone. But actually, if you could just leave a small area of long grass, even a small area will really help.
But you must trim it because there's always lots of wildlife out there.
Yeah.
So trimmers are bad.
Yeah.
So when you eventually have to cut your long grass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is quite a problem for long grass and elderly people.
No mow is fine if you don't live next door to my next door neighbour, who gives me daggers every time I'm late in mowing the lawn. I don't even think about no mow May, I dare.
So this is really interesting because I did a course on behaviour change, and we used no mow May as an example, and said, well, okay, well, why don't people do no mow May? And a lot of it is things like pressure from neighbours that think you're being lazy if you haven't mowed your lawn, or actually images in country life magazines or home and garden magazines show these perfectly manicured lawns, and it's all this kind of pressure that's from other people really that stops us doing things. We've got some quite nice signs that basically say, I'm not being lazy, I'm helping the bees, or you know, so if you actually look on Bug Life also, so that No Mow May initiative originally came from Bug Life, and if you go on their website you can print off some little signs that explain what you're doing.
I'll try that, I'll try no May, August maybe. Anybody else, you had a?
Yeah, you've talked about the decline in many species. What about the things that are becoming pests like squirrels?
I don't really have any figures on those kind of things, other than I do know that there are initiatives around the country where they're looking at how we bring the red squirrels back. So Brownsea Island, there's various areas of Cumbria and North Yorkshire as well that are kind of have specific projects around that. We don't have any particularly in Warwickshire at this point in time, but hopefully, you know, the idea is that we'll start to kind of those kind of initiatives can start to spread as well.
Susan, are there any initiatives on the Canada geese? Seem to drive out so many other wild.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any particular.
Talking about neighbour pressure and influence, we live at the end of a cul-de-sac and there's a strip of grass directly outside our front door. It's the other side of our drive. And new neighbours moved in about 3 years ago. And I said to them, why don't you make it turn into a wildflower meadow? Actually encouraged them. Bless them, they did.
Yeah.
They came out with a rotavator, took off all of the turf, planted seeds all over it. Now it's 4 feet high with wildflowers.
Yeah.
So
That's
just that,
brilliant. One of
that's-
my
that's-
colleagues at
and
work.
it's lovely.
Yeah,
And
one of my colleagues at work did a similar thing, so she had an area outside her house. And she planted it, and then she went to the neighbour and said, this is what I'm doing, I've got some spare seeds left, would you like them? And she gave them, and then it's all about that kind of connection, and, you know, I don't know all your neighbours or all your family, I'm never gonna reach those people. But you can talk about what you know and what you can do and help spread that message.
something else, I lead a team at Holy Trinity Church, helping to keep the churchyard tidy. We have 2 acres there of most wonderful green space.
Yeah.
Right by the edge of the river. And thousands of people walk through there every day.
Yeah.
We've put up about 20 bird boxes in the trees, but I think there's a lot more that we could do.
That's where our community advisor might be able to come down and have a look.
I'd be pleased to have
There's also
your assistance with that.
there's also a scheme for churches, I think, where you can kind of work towards a nature friendly award. So I think there's a bronze, silver and gold.
Yes, there is.
And I think there is a kind of group of churches doing that in
Yes.
Stratford.
The Methodists are leading that.
Yeah, yeah.
I was. There are no bat boxes there at the moment, but the vicar is rather concerned that if they encourage bats to come into the churchyard, they might finish up inside
There
the
might be
church.
enough belfry.
Yeah, already getting that.
We always have doves in the belfry.
Don't you have, is there some sort of thing where, because Holy Trinity is a listed building, you can't actually bung things up there, you know?
That sounds
So-
absolutely
so
true. You couldn't hang boxes on the side of the church,
Mm.
but they can go in the trees, of course,
Yeah.
or on the fences or elsewhere.
Well, they can be holes in the brickwork. Whereas the box is actually inside, not just one
Yeah, but
brick
it's
out.
it's all stone and it's very much
Yeah.
listed
It's all-
building. You can't touch the structure of the church.
Do you work with, garden centres and the like?
So that's what we're trying to do on a national kind of level with the kind of the campaigning for the ban of sales of peat.
Yeah.
Poison.
Yeah,
The shelves are full of poison.
yeah, yeah,
And the assumption that you have to kill everything to have a garden is nonsense.
If you go to a garden, if you go to a garden centre, you know, somebody might go, "Oh, I'm going to put a bird box up." They'll buy a bird box, which isn't appropriate. It's got a
Yeah.
little stalk on it, which isn't appropriate, or it's not the right size. There's no advice. Nobody tells them don't put them up so they're facing south and all
yeah,
that. So they buy a box, they put it on a wall and think they've done something, and they wonder why birds don't come and nest. I think that degree of information
Mm.
might help, and if you can influence,
yeah,
Leaflets, there's leaflets where they sell bird boxes.
yeah.
Leaflets saying,
Yeah, I
telling
think
people what to do.
we have those because we have them in our shop, you know, telling people where to situate this. We've also got, I think, there's a wildlife gardening leaflet, which I think has advice from that as well, so it's a great idea.
In Albany about this, there were hubs where they met for swift discussions. And they have a lot of swifts around Albany.
Yeah.
There was a lot of canal. It's growing. You know, it's really. That's what I said for the time.
We have lots.
You live it now.
Yes, I live near the canal, it's tons, but I think most of them nest in the existing rooms because they're old houses.
Bob, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, do you have any cheerful stories? There are all these statistics about declining species. But I mean, then aren't some of them actually increasing?
Yeah, I mean, some of them will be increasing. The overall picture is that you know, I think 19% are declining. But there are things like I was saying with the barn owl boxes, where we put barn owl boxes up, we're surveying those boxes, so we know that they're being used and we know that there's breeding pairs in them. And so some of this is also about surveying and reporting what you're seeing as well. So we had a discussion a few weeks ago with a group in Nuneaton who were concerned about housing development, and they were saying, yeah, but there's bats on this brook and we see them all the time. I said, but do you report that you've seen them? I said, no. Right, so the planners will do a very desktop kind of search to start with on where the records of those species are. So where you know where they are, please record them, because that all feeds into kind of those figures and helps us to work out whether what we are doing is working. You know, there are some, you know, brilliant stories. So that in Nuneaton as well, there's a stretch of the Wenbrook that one of the community groups there regularly walks down. They've now spotted water voles on that stretch, and only a couple of weeks ago spotted the water vole with babies. So there's lots of, you know, really positive. That's areas where we've done quite a lot, where we've installed coir rolls, and we've done a lot of that kind of work around canals as well. So we have a team that's working on wetland improvements as well.
The otters in the canal here, off Mason Road, the canal.
Yeah.
I've got photographs of them.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me. That's really amazing. And the catch watching them coming out of the water and standing back and being interested, but not attempting to take them.
Yeah. So, you know, it's really, really valuable for you to report these things to kind of the local records centre, because that all helps to kind of support the picture that we're trying to build up as well. I don't know whether you've seen, but Warwickshire are also writing their local nature recovery strategy at the moment. So there's a survey out. If I send the link to you, if you wouldn't mind forwarding on, that'd be great, because there's basically a link for communities to complete a survey, which will feed into the local nature recovery strategy. So I will, I'll send that link to you, and then, you know, if people want to complete that, that's an online survey as well.
Do you have a base in anywhere near Stratford?
We don't have a base. No, we don't have a base in Stratford. Our main base is Brandon, which is, you know, half an hour away. But I will have a chat with Janet Palmer, because I did speak to her at a community group meeting a few weeks back, and she offered to some things in.
Something in next year. Yeah. So maybe if you can talk to Janet before our next meeting, then Janet can come and tell us what's going on. That'd be a really nice link up. Yeah.
We did do a little trip. There was 4 of us all together, went across to Brandon. I'm a member, and it was open to everybody, but there was only a couple of ladies and what's his name, the artist? Ken, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, we're happy to do that again. You know, I mean, happy to put 3 bodies in the back of my car and cart you over. As long as a pair of binoculars with you and some more good solid boots.
We've also been working with Stratford Town Trust as well, on the local nature reserve. The name went out of my head then. Yeah, so I think over in Big Green Week, Carl did a walk around Benches Meadow. So actually, you know,
Tied on by swifts.
Excellent. But you know, somebody could potentially come round, or even Welcome Hills. You know, if you want to do something more locally, then
Hampton Wood is very good too.
Yeah.
I often go there.
Yeah.
Not seen any tree sparrows, but tree creepers and nuthatches. Fabulous.
Yeah.
And muntjac and people.
Do you network with the RSPB?
We do. I've got a meeting with the RSPB in a few weeks. Yeah. So I think, you know, historically, organisations have worked quite separately, kind of seen each other as competitors in many ways, but you know, the job is too big for us to work like that. And we're also part of the Wildlife and Countryside Link, and that basically is a sort of group that brings all of those organisations together to kind of comment on policy and create joint campaigns. So the Defend Nature Now campaign, that was at the back end of last year. That was kind of a coordinated campaign amongst all of those organisations, so National Trust were in there, Woodland Trust,
Heritage, yeah.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, we're all trying to do the same thing, so, you know, there's definitely enough work to do for us all to do, we're not competing.
Do you know anything about the otters that are now being reported around? Yes. I mean, this is literally hearsay, but there's been a terrible catastrophe amongst the swans. In the swans where I live have all lost their babies for no apparent reason, because as far as we know, the flu is not back. And I belong to a Facebook page where we get people saying, it's the otters, and also mink. And I have no reason to believe that there aren't any, because I know Janet Palmer saw one. So they're definitely around. I mean, have you done any work on, well, the invasive species that have apparently been reintroduced? And their devastating effect, if this is true.
Well, otters are an invasive species, the mink.
But it could be mink, we don't know. This is the problem. Nobody knows.
Well, I guess the thing well, I don't know, it's not my kind of area of expertise really. I think the main thing to do is probably to email into the trust, into inquiries, and then something like that can be directed to the right people. We do regularly, or we did regularly do otter surveys across the county that was led by a volunteer, but our wetlands team will know more about that than I do, so you know, the thing to do is to email, and then
you don't know any specific.
I don't know anything specific.
Might be worth, thinking about. You introduce one thing and lose something else. We don't know. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, there's in a bit of a bad thing happening generally amongst the wildlife on the canal. No ducks, no ducklings even.
And it might be made worse when they start building all those houses they're going to build on the canal. Who knows what's going to happen then?
That's why those sightings are really important, and those records of what's seen there. So that those kind of the mitigation can be put in place, that planners can be made, that can be held to account. Not planners, developers can be held to account, and to be, you know, planning departments can request that they have mitigation in place and all of those things. But if they don't know that those species are there, they're not going to go and survey every site in detail. So their first step will be a desktop survey. So please do report those sightings.
Okay, I think that's brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. I've loads to think about, people. Let's let go our bit, even if it involves not mowing.